colleagues on the Eagle Beat. He covers it all for the Philadelphia Inquirer, one of the lead columnists here in town. Marcus Hayes joins us here on Birds 365. All right, Marcus, serious question to start. Which do you think was more likely? The NFL fixed the game for the Chiefs to win, to keep Patrick Mahomes as the face of the franchise, more so by playing on a doctored field, which would hurt the Eagles more than it would the Chiefs. Not sure how they knew that, but somehow they did. Or that the referee was in on it. Of course, that kind of questionable call against Bradford late in the game was made for the sole purpose of the Chiefs winning the game. Which of those two ways to fix the game in advance do you think the NFL was more guilty of?
Well, both teams had to play on the same field, and it was an obvious holding call. So I'm not going
to. You're not buying into any of the grassy knoll theories I'm getting on my Twitter, on my phone last night on WIP.
It's funny, like, Philadelphia spent 2 weeks criticizing San Francisco fans and media for sour grapes, and they have out sour graped them by a million. It's just,
unbelievable.
And it's the latest thing is like, oh great, Jonathan Gannon's gone. Now maybe we can get somewhere.
Oh,
I mean, he's at the number 2 defense. Number 2 defense, and they took him to the Super Bowl. He gave up 7 points in the first half to the best quarterback in history. And a Hall of Fame coach who's probably going to be a Rushmore coach. Yeah. I mean, Philadelphia loses with the grace of Donald Trump.
I'm actually impressed at just the closed-mindedness. They were certainly in that game. If they make a play defensively, at some point they probably win the game. But I saw your column on the losses of Jonathan Gannon, and I'm with you versus Shane Steichen. Gannon is the more important loss because, you have an offensive head coach, so part of it's just common sense. And, he had sort of control of the fiefdom on the defensive side of the ball. But as you point out, means once in a generation. Patrick Mahomes is the generational talent at the quarterback position. He's the guy. It's a proper tag.
325, and the reason I had it was because I believe that the Eagles' offensive line was superior not only to the Chiefs' offensive line, but to the Chiefs' defensive line, and that was just a miscalculation. The Eagles lost it in the trenches. They couldn't get their running game going with their running back. They did pass protect well, but this isn't the fiercest pass rush. I think it's if you remember, the Rams had a good pass rush.
The Eagles are willing to go. So I think he's one guy that you can say pretty clearly at this point is probably not going to be back. Now, they have so many decisions to make on the defensive side of the ball because they went all in. Hassan Reddick's going to be here, Josh Sweat. There's a couple guys. But you got to make decisions virtually everywhere. Are you bringing Fletcher Cox back? Brandon Graham, Javon Hargrave up front, T.J. Edwards you got to sign. Kaiser White, you're going to make a decision. Marcus Epps, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, James Bradbury, on and on and on and on. Didn't this increase the sense of urgency for you? Like they're here. They got to get this one because it's going to be much more difficult moving forward.
Well, before we knew Fletcher was coming, so this time last year, there were some things we didn't know. We didn't know if Fletcher was coming back. We didn't know if Brandon was going to be any good and if they were going to bring him back or cut him, We didn't know they were going to have Kaiser White. We didn't know they were going to have James Bradbury. We didn't know it. So they clearly saw this as a one-year window, which is why this time last year we were wondering which quarterback they were going to trade for, right? Yeah. This was a one-year window. Yeah. Even if they kept Fletcher and kept Brandon, we knew that this was probably going to be their last year. So I would say Jonathan. I'll call you Jonathan from now on. In the memory,
new one. Yeah.
In the memory of Jonathan Gannon. I don't think there's a whole lot of decisions to be made by the Eagles. If Brandon Graham and Fletcher Cox and Javon Hargrave want to come back at a discount, I'm sure they'd gladly find room for them on another one-year deal. But Fletcher wants 2 years. Brandon wants 2 years. TJ Edwards is going to, this is his time to get as much money as he can from somebody who doesn't watch Super Bowl tape. It's I mean, it was he was the special teams guy too. He was the guy that gave up the return. That was his lane. The guy went past him on. I mean, not because he wasn't there, just he wasn't he wasn't athletic enough to make the play. So, I think the big decisions for them are, when do you do Jalen, and in relation to when you do CJ Gardner-Johnson, and then try to do James Bradbury. And you're going to overpay James Bradbury. You're going to pay CJ market value, and you're going to pay Jalen Hurts, the quarterback, market value. But you're going to have to overpay James Bradbury, and it's going to hurt. So that's the big gamble. You're going to have two cornerbacks making a ton of money who got roasted by, the best quarterback they faced all year. And with a new defensive coordinator, and I think I counted 8 defensive players, if you want to count Ndamukong Suh and Linval Joseph as frontline players, who can be free agents this year. So this defense is going to be a mess, and almost all the decisions to be made, except I think Isaac Seumalo and Miles Sanders, right. Isaac Seumalo, the right guard, are on the defensive side. So it'll be really interesting to see where they go in the draft for me, and how many young players are playing frontline defensive positions next year. And I really think if they succeed, it hinges on the ability of Nakobe Dean to be a playmaker at linebacker next season.
I want to confirm what you were saying about 2 of the defensive guys that have to make a decision on. If they have to get past their comfort zone to specifically lock in one of their D-backs and quote unquote overpay, you think it's more Bradbury than Chauncey Gardner-Johnson?
No, I think it's more Chauncey Gardner-Johnson than Bradbury, but I don't think they acquired Chauncey Gardner-Johnson without expecting to pay him market value as a safety. I think they see him as a foundational piece. Brian Dawkins, Malcolm Jenkins, we've seen them invest in that position before, but only one of them. So sorry, Marcus Epps. But I think they acquired him with the intention of paying him, and the intention of paying Jalen Hurts, 2 guys who are of similar ages, similar skill sets. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is a magnificently gifted safety. I mean, he's one of your better blitzers. He can play nickel. He makes play. He gets interceptions, and he understands the concepts. So I think they see those 2 guys as up the middle guys who are inevitably going to get paid, and they'll pay market value for them, but they'll have to get creative to extend to I guess re-sign now James Bradbury.
All right, let's talk about, since we went down the market value route, Marcus, let's talk about the quarterback, because say what you want about Joe Banner, and many people have, but the guy knows the financial landscape of the NFL. He put the number at between 47 and 52 average annual value of potential extension for Jalen Hurts. First off, and Jeffrey Lurie said it during Super Bowl week, this guy's got nothing left to prove, Jalen Hurts. Number one, would you agree with that? And number two, is it even feel like tasting bad medicine that you're going to have to sign Jalen Hurts to this contract? I mean, that's the cost of doing business at the position if you have a superstar player. And by the way, I use that term legitimately. This is a superstar player. Second in the MVP voting. I think he played better than Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl. I think he did. I'm not saying he's better than Patrick Mahomes over a consistent period. I think, as I said, that's the best quarterback in the NFL. But on that one day, for that 60 minutes, he made a big mistake, and that enters into it. He was unbelievable. Is there any buyer's remorse that's going to happen when they have to sign Jalen Hurts?
Well, I'll take the second point first. Patrick Mahomes is maybe the best quarterback in history. He's certainly the most talented quarterback in history. And I'm a big Aaron Rodgers stan, and I respect what Tom Brady did.
By the way.
But Patrick Mahomes won the game, and Jalen Hurts gave up 7 points. So I can't say that, that was a 7-point mistake, and they lost by 4.
Yes,
so, going forward, here's the calculus for me. Jalen Hurts has been injured significantly at the end of all 3 seasons. And he was injured significantly because of the type of quarterback he is. It's not that he's fragile, and it's not that he's not tough. It's that he is exposed by himself and his coaches to injury. He was injured on an RPO with a legal tackle, injured by a guy who's fast or faster than him, but much, much bigger. That's going to happen over and over and over again. The human body can only take so much. He had surgery after last season. He doesn't need surgery on his shoulder. So that's the biggest part of the calculus. So how do I protect myself from that? I don't sign him to as many years, but I max out the amount of guaranteed money early in his career. So I think the number that Joe Banner was tossing around was like 5 years and 250, right? Well, I would be more comfortable giving him 5 years and 250 than, 10 years and 500 million like Patrick Mahomes got. And the trade-off would be I essentially make the first 3.5 years guaranteed. So 5 years, 250, and 100 and what is it? Like 138, 125 million dollars guaranteed. That's what I'd be comfortable doing. Now, that's not going to break the bank, and it's not going to set the records that Jalen Hurts and his representatives hope for. But, finish the season healthy, and then we'll talk.
All right, so let me play a little negotiating devil's advocate with you here, Marcus.
Mm-hmm.
That Jalen and his agent say, listen, here's where we're starting. It's going to be Deshaun Watson's contract. You're going to have to go at least 5 years. We're talking about that $50 million per hour, and we want every single dollar guaranteed. And we're not moving off it. How difficult would the season be next year if they don't have an extension in place? And Jalen is playing on the last year of his rookie deal with free agency in the offing, and they haven't gotten anything done. Does that just derail a season in 2023 before it even starts?
Well, that would depend on the character of the quarterback, and I think Jalen Hurts' character is impeccable, number one. And you couched it, Jody, as Jalen Hurts saying, "Okay, look what I'm going to do." How is that bad for the Eagles? The leverage, and the Eagles have plenty of draft picks. If Jalen Hurts says, "I'm not going to play for this money," then you draft a quarterback.
No,
Jalen Hurts might be his own worst enemy, because number one, he'd be playing for a contract, and he'd have to play very, very well to get that contract, because the Eagles wouldn't be the only doubters. And I don't know how they regard him. I know what Jeffrey said. I don't know how they regard him. So, but we're playing devil's advocate. If having a young quarterback playing on a show me contract that doesn't preclude him from coming back to the Philadelphia Eagles, and maybe next year he shows you he's worth all that money and all that guaranteed money. He's not going to not take it. He's not going to say, I'm so principled, I'm going to go get this money from a crummy team over here that doesn't have a quarterback. Number one. Number two, I don't think Jalen Hurts would shy away from competition at all. Alex Smith didn't. Alex Smith had a very good year getting out of Kansas City. It happens all the time. So, would it be uncomfortable for, the first few weeks of training camp? Yeah. But Jalen Hurts is probably the most competitive, committed athlete I've ever seen this side of Michael Jordan. And he would definitely play hard and play well for that contract. And you just hope you can draft the next Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, the Eagles did it once. Why can't they do it again? And I think you're right. The miscalculation the first time was that Carson Wentz couldn't handle the competition.
But there was no competition.
I know. Well, that's the funny part.
They said this guy's your backup. This guy, we don't think he can.
But you can't control. Away. Look, I just said, and I get myself in trouble by doing this, Marcus. I just said Patrick Mahomes is a generational talent, is the best player in football. Right. But I also said on one particular Sunday in Glendale, Arizona, I thought Jalen Hurts played better. That's essentially what I said. You got a commenter said, John's the only one in the world that thinks Jalen Hurts is better than Patrick Mahomes. I literally said the opposite thing. You can't control other people's filters, their thought processes, their craziness. And you say something and they hear something different. Carson Wentz heard it but he felt something different. Jalen Hurts isn't that guy. And I agree with you, by the way, from the health standpoint. Look, I mean, the guy plays the game a certain way. You can't take that away, because if you take that away, he's not the same player. So the shelf life is probably going to be smaller. And they do have to protect themselves on the back end. But I have confidence in Howie Roseman, Jake Rosenberg, and Jeffrey Lurie, by the way. He already proved with Carson Wentz. Look, if we got to move on, we're going to move on. And other ownerships that make excuses that this is too much money, they're just making excuses. Long term, this organization, do you think they're set up? You know, back in Doug's day, we said they came up with the phrase "the new normal." This is going to be the way it is. Here they are again. It didn't work the first time, but they have a lot of questions. Do you think this organization is set up for sustained success, or is this another sort of shooting star?
Well, the big difference between that team in 2017 and this team is, I believe that they have certainly more character at quarterback, but also they have sort of been preparing to change the guard. And a lot of that guard that they're changing is the reason they went both times. So if they had great, I think maybe like a month and a half ago, I wrote a column saying they are set up for sustained success. They should see the 49ers in the NFC Championship game several times, because if you look around the league, no two teams are set up better than those two teams. But at the time, I assumed they would be returning their coordinators, at least for this coming season. And I knew Jonathan Gannon wasn't interested in going to Houston, which to me is a big deal. I'm less convinced that they're set up for sustained success now than I was 3 weeks ago, because they are losing a defensive coordinator who integrated, I think, 7 new pieces this year and is losing a defense that's losing 8 pieces. So I'd give it I'd give them a B, or I'd say the likelihood of that is like a 7 versus an A or a 9 3 weeks ago, because they're losing both coordinators. And, they were undressed to a degree by the number 1 coach and the number 1 quarterback and a better offensive line than I thought. But really, outside of Travis Kelce, kind of mediocre talent on the Chiefs offense. So maybe this defense wasn't quite as good as I thought. But then again, we've seen, Tom Brady make horrible offenses look spectacular because he's Tom Brady. So,
all right, Mark.
Yeah, I think they're set up, but not as well as I thought.
John gave me his thoughts on this. I need yours. Gannon leaving, Steichen leaving. Now 2 openings on the Eagles staff. We know who the internal candidates are. The coach did say, when you guys put him to the fire a couple of weeks ago, when the names were floating out there as interview possibilities, that he knows what's going on and around the league and is always keeping an eye on other teams' coaching staff. So they got to fill the void, and we'll see who they fill it with. More likely both guys on staff now. If they're going to go outside, which of the sides of the ball do you think is more likely? What do you think the Eagles' new coaching additions are going to be, and or promotions over the next 2 weeks?
Well, what Nick did very well is, and I heard the end of the last segment, John was talking about they have several candidates to become offensive coordinator, because Nick stockpiled a lot of guys and included a lot of guys in the process weekly to step into that role. The problem is, losing both of their coordinators, those guys might poach those lower level coaches as well. I mean, I think Brian Johnson becomes the offensive coordinator. He's, you want to keep the quarterback happy, you keep his pet coach happy. But that means you're probably going to lose Kevin Patullo to either Shane Steichen, more likely Shane Steichen than Jonathan Gannon. But, let's not underestimate the possibility of losing Denard Wilson to Jonathan Gannon. I mean, the defensive backs were spectacular here this year. They played really, really well. Yeah. Integrating C.J. Gardner-Johnson and getting the most out of Marcus Epps, that's Denard Wilson. I mean, Jonathan Gannon's a first-time head coach. He was the defensive backs coach 2 years ago. I mean, his rise has been spectacular. And there's no reason he can't overpay Denard Wilson to come with him. So to answer your question, Jody, I mean, it sort of depends how these three staffs are comprised and who's willing to pay the most, because Indianapolis has a really good defense and Arizona has a chance to win. These are not bad places to be. Neither of those places are bad places to be. So we're talking about, instead of sort of the silo we live in, there's going to be like a diaspora of like candidates and coach and possibilities. And I don't know of a coach on the defensive side that they would be, that Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman would be comfortable with, other than Denard Wilson. And without Patullo or Johnson, and here's the other issue. Jalen Hurts has advanced more in the last 20, 25 games than I've ever seen a quarterback advance. Does Brian Johnson have to sort of continue to do that? And is the offensive coordinator job spread over, or does Nick just take it back over? That's the other thing we're not talking about. Nick Sirianni was the offensive coordinator and play caller for the first 7 games of his experience as a head coach. I think that's the most likely thing to happen. You'll have an offensive coordinator in name who's responsible for a position as well, but Nick Sirianni is going to be the guy running the show. That's every coach's fantasy. Every offensive coach's fantasy is to be, what Andy Reid or Sean McVay were. Yeah.
Yeah. And Nick has said that, Inquirer.com, Marcus Hayes, listen to him, Sports Radio WIP, at Ink Stained Wretch. Marcus, Nick is on record saying, if Shane leaves, I might take play calling back. Does that complicate? We all say, Brian Johnson's going to be the offensive coordinator because, as you correctly pointed out, Jalen Hurts wants that. Now Jalen Hurts is going to be a $50 million player, so you want to make that guy happy. But if you're Brian Johnson and you have a chance to go call plays somewhere else versus stay here and be that coordinator who doesn't call plays, you might go somewhere else.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I don't think Shane Steichen's not going to call his own plays either.
No, but Carolina was looking at Brian Johnson. Maybe Frank Reich says, I want to be CEO coach. We don't know. Jonathan Gannon, I think he's going to hire one of his old coaching buddies from Minnesota. That's what I heard behind the scenes. But if he's got an opportunity at Brian Johnson, maybe he changes his mind. Maybe he lets him call plays. He's calling plays there with a defensive guy. Mm-hmm. That could complicate things if Nick wants to take back play calling.
Or simplify them.
What?
Yeah, I mean, and maybe that's the best option for this team. We're not really interested in what happens in Carolina or Arizona or Indianapolis. If the topic is what's best for the Eagles, maybe the best thing for the Eagles is, Nick Sirianni retaking that role. Problem is, he's going to have a new defensive coordinator, and that's one of the reasons he stepped back from play calling in the middle of 2021, because Jonathan Gannon didn't get off to a great start, and the defense got much better when Nick Sirianni became involved in sort of as an umbrella head coach.
All right, Marcus, last one for me, and I'm going to go easy on you. Multiple choice to end it, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Which of these 3 potential scenarios lend itself most to a fight at the 50-yard line before the game starts? Brandon Ayuk versus a Eagles defender, Juju Smith-Schuster versus an Eagles defender, or Jonathan Gannon versus an Eagle fan coming out of the stands before the game starts? If they're going to be punches thrown at the 50 before the game gets underway, which of those 3 already scheduled matchups, we know they're happening, do you think ends up in a fisticuffs show at midfield before an Eagle game next year?
Well, if I have to make a choice, it'd probably be Brandon Ayuk, because I think he's a little unhinged. But the Gannon versus fan would be the one I'd pay to see.
He would ep and gut that fan.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, that's a blowout, that one.
Yeah. Jonathan talks tough, but he's not really that big a guy. It depends on how big a fan comes out of the stands.
Neither was
I need to give you more details on to describe that potential showdown.
Neither was Bruce Lee.
Yeah.
Very true.
JG's jacked, man. You can't tell. He's jacked. He used to play. Yeah.
Marcus, great stuff. We always appreciate it when you come on. Again, if you didn't read it, and maybe you didn't because you were just so forlorn with the outcome of the game on Sunday, go back and check out Marcus's column after the Super Bowl. It's tremendous. And he was very good with us here today. Marcus, thank you much. Appreciate it. We'll get you on playing during the offseason.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks, Mark.
That is Marcus Hayes of the Philadelphia Inquirer here with us on Birds 365. Now, I think I kissed Marcus's took us enough. I disagree with a couple things that he said. Just go get another Jalen Hurts in the draft. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, that's easier said than done.
And I'll go more specific because I've already started doing my work on evaluating the guys in the draft this year. It's not happening. If you don't have the first or second pick, you're not getting another Jalen Hurts. And even those two guys are reaches because Jalen's already proven. So that's a nice theory. I don't think it's based in much reality. And what was the other thing that Marcus said that I was kind of surprised by? I forgot.
Anyway, because I've expounded this theory because it's gotten so expensive at the quarterback position, and we see it. It's so hard to build your roster when you have to pay the quarterback. So I've said, maybe teams will go to the college sort of mentality. You got to reload every 4 years. But, look at Jalen Hurts. It's worked out perfectly, but it took 3 years. It takes these guys got to develop, number one, even if you get the first pick in the draft. Look at Trevor Lawrence, who's, trending in the right direction now that he's under Doug Peterson. But we're going to be in year 3. It takes a while, even for the most talented prospects. So while it sounds good on paper, keep rotating. Can't. If you got a quarterback, you got to pay him, you got to keep him, and you got to figure out things in other areas. The position is too important.
You're not the first to espouse that theory, and I've certainly talked about it on the air. The Los Angeles Rams went out and got Matthew Stafford, who's taken down a big percentage of their salary cap. They didn't care, gave up what it took to got him, brought him in. They won a Super Bowl. Patrick Mahomes only makes $45 million a year, that big percentage of the cap. The Kansas City Chiefs figured out a way to build the team around him and still win a Super Bowl. So that theory hasn't held water. That, you take your run and then you got to restart it. You got to restart the engine and take a step backwards and take 2 forwards. Or except the last 2 teams that won the Super Bowl did so with a very expensive.
By the way, I have to get this off my chest. Did you hear me say Jalen Hurts is better than Patrick Mahomes?
No, you said what I said here on Monday. We agree. Same thing. The better quarterback on the field on Sunday. Throughout the 60 minutes of the game, I believe was Jalen Hurts. You believe was Jalen Hurts.
Yes.
Neither one of us said Jalen Hurts is a better quarterback than Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes got the track record that he has and is in the conversation. The only one who's in the conversation to potentially catch Brady as the best of all time. Nobody's saying that about Jalen Hurts just yet. But if you believe he was better on Sunday, you can say he was better on Sunday. Yeah. I did too.
I thought I was going crazy. I don't know what these people hear sometimes. I mean, it's unbelievable. That's my own fault for paying attention. But I mean, if you're not going to listen, I mean, it's just frustrating. At times.
Right. The people on the stream sometimes hear something that you didn't say or mistake something they said. I knew exactly what you said because I agreed with it. I thought Hurts was the best quarterback Sunday. If you just break down the film from the 60 minutes of both quarterbacks after the game is over and done with, who do I think had the better game? Fumble included, I think Jalen Hurts did. The Chiefs were better than the Eagles. That's why the Chiefs have the Lombardi Trophy and why they're going to get championship rings. Their team, including their coaching staff, and they won the coaching matchup, were better, and that's why they're champs. But if you're just talking pure comparison of the quarterbacks, I'm with you, John. I think Hurts was better than
I did because I want that. And I always like to go to PFF afterwards. They don't put the grades up until Monday after the game. I didn't even get to them until yesterday. But I always like to see, does the film match up with what I saw? Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Patrick Mahomes was he got an 89.5, which is a phenomenal grade, and he was tremendous. And Jalen Hurts got a 92.2. So the film said it as well.
You, me, and PFF also at the same way for Sunday's performance at the quarterback position. He's John McMullen. I'm Jody McDonald. Quickie timeout, come back. Got a couple more things to hit on. I do have a draft question. I know we got months before the draft, but I already got a draft question from McMullen. And don't forget, Mike Gill, our buddy from down the shore, 97.3, the Sports Pass, ESPN Radio, is going to jump in his usual Wednesday spot. He'll join us in about